The Ensombl Advice South Africa podcast is intended for professional financial advisors. All discussion is limited to publicly available information and should not be interpreted as legal, professional, or financial advice. Ensombl Advice is not a licensed financial services provider and does not provide financial services. Before making investment decisions, you should obtain financial advice from a qualified financial advisor.
Hi, I'm Louis van der Merwe, Certified Financial Planner. Join me every week where I get to have discussions with global leaders in the financial planning space to help you serve your clients better and run a more efficient financial planning practice. This is Financial Planners South Africa podcast.
Portfolio Metrics is thrilled to bring you this podcast in support of our common passion for people and the evolution of wealth management. Our global business links precision investment management to expert financial advice through partnerships and technology. Portfolio Metrics is an authorized financial services provider. ComSpace is a revenue management solution developed specifically for independent financial advisors. It is a web-based application that tracks, allocates, and manages advisor revenue. The system seamlessly reads commission statements from financial institutions and can address any permutation of commission splits. ComSpace provides mind-blowing, out-the-box revenue business intelligence and analytics, along with super flexible reporting to effectively manage and grow your business.
Welcome to another episode of Ensombl Advice South Africa. Tonight I have with me in the studio Aron Samuels. Aron is someone that you might have seen on Instagram. He is someone that is very comfortable behind the camera and has a way of explaining things in a really nice way. Aron, it's a privilege to have you with me here tonight.
Thanks, Louis. I am. I've learned to become comfortable in front of the camera. It wasn't always the case. But sometimes you need to push yourself in a bit of a direction and then you don't look back after that. So I'm in front of the camera once again.
And what a profession to actually push yourself a little bit. Hey, like this is really something where I feel like there's a push and a pull from different directions just to actually stay alive, especially those beginning years. Give us a little bit of an introduction of who Aron is and how he got into financial services world.
Yeah, so if I start in the early days, I grew up in a small town. I actually read a headline this afternoon, funny enough, that it's actually the town with the cleanest air in Africa, or in the top 10 or something, and that is Oudtshoorn of all places. So that's where I grew up and did most of my schooling there. Finished up high school in Stellenbosch. My family relocated, and then I started my studies. So I had a keen interest in law at the time, so I studied a BCom law, and through that I was exposed to financial planning really for the first time. I think at that stage one's perception is that financial planning refers to some insurance policies and maybe an investment or some pension thing on the side. And once you start being exposed to it, academically at least, that's where the bug bit me. So after I finished my undergrad, I entered the industry as an interning as a financial planner within the practice. So
what did that exposure look like? When you say you've been exposed to it, like how does someone studying law end up in financial services? That's. I can see the connections, but I'd love to hear how that actually happened.
Yeah, so I was actually telling a colleague the story the other day when I was a student, obviously having no exposure to the industry and only knowing what I've read. On paper, I told myself I probably want to be a compliance officer. And that would have probably ended in tears for everyone involved because I told myself that it would be the perfect cross-section between law and financial services, and on paper that just seems like the right fit. But it's possibly the most wrong fit for me that you'll be able to find. But it just shows when you're a student, when in high school, you don't actually know until you get into it. So I actually had investments and financial planning as elective modules during my undergrad studies, and that's where I started to, that's it. I was exposed to it, and that caught my interest. The law yeah, so still love the law and the way that it taught me to think and to look at things. But yeah, I definitely started to gravitate towards financial side of things.
That's so interesting because when I think of someone studying law, they end up typically with insurance companies as legal advisors, and they would explain to
Well,
you the intricacies of, the estate plan and what impact this has. But yet you found yourself in a practice. How much did you rely on your training, specifically within the South African law context during your early years?
during that first year or two, when I was really very much a newbie, that's and even part of some of the introductory work I did. So maybe just a bit of context around that. I was actually given amazing opportunities through the CISA Academy, and they have a program which they run to enter more younger and advisors of color into the market, and they link up with some of the top practices all over the country now. I was actually part of the first group which they ran in 2016, if I'm not mistaken. And even through the introductory work I did with them at the academy, you realize how much legislation actually underpins what we do. Everything regarding financial services on the product level, at least, it finds its foundation in legislation. An RA is an RA because legislation says that's what an RA is. And your unit trust collective investment scheme is that because the Act says it's that. So everything is really underpinned by the law if you break it down like that. So I think it did help me to understand or grasp things maybe a bit quicker. And it also made me a lot more comfortable with the amount of reading one typically has to do. So yeah, that's something I can put a lot of people off. So when people tell me they want to study law, first thing I ask them is, do you like reading? And if I don't, and I'm like, think again, think twice.
Do you like reading acts? It's funny
Yeah.
you say that because I literally got a voice note maybe 2 hours ago from an industry colleague that started studying the deceased estate administration diploma. And he said, I'm supposed to read 110 pages this week in acts. What?
Yeah. And I mean, that's just legislation. And then they're throwing some case law with that as well. You're dealing with appeal cases and concord cases, goes up to 40 to 60 pages. And you have a few of those to read as well. So yeah, it's quite a bit. It's demanding.
Do people still knock on your door and say, hey, please interpret this act or the change in legislation or the change in the Income Tax Act? Or have you moved away from that?
In the early years, as if I'm that old, but in the early years, maybe still, or more fresh out of my studies. But yeah, I think I put people off of that. So they don't bother me for legal opinion anymore because I'm not really as clued up as I need to be able to give a valuable opinion. So yeah, no, people come to me for different kind of advice these days.
I would say you've rebranded.
I have unintentionally but successfully rebranded.
Before we get into that rebrand, tell me a bit more about the CISA Academy. It's something that pops up every now and again. We get an email from the CISA Academy saying, hey, would you want to bring in graduates in your business? A lot of practices are skeptical, but what is the experience of someone actually going through that process? What did they help you in terms of the skill set? And also, what was that matching with a practice experience for you?
Sure. So, yeah, I mean, they do some really good work, and Alicia David sets up the academy at the moment. I always tell her they really do life-changing work. I remember as a graduate, I just finished up my studies. I was working part-time in retail, and it's that time of the year where you need to find a job now. And me being me, I kept very close track of all the job applications I sent in. I had a spreadsheet. Who did I apply to? What date did I apply? When am I going to follow up? And I probably applied to in excess of 50 jobs. And yeah, you tell yourself you're fairly bright. You have a decent qualification, BCom law. It's not that common. You'd think it would be less hard. That's really not. So yeah, the CISA Academy was one of the only institutions I can say that gave me a go. And yeah, so they run a number of programs, and the one that I was involved in obviously is the IFA internship program. And like you said, they they partner with some of the bigger management firms, Allen Gray 91, M&G and Coral, if I'm not mistaken, or at the time it was those four. And they really do try to do a lot of work in one, work readiness. Because I mean, you're green, you're new. Yesterday you were a student, tomorrow you're an intern. And then they also do a lot of effort in the whole matching up process. But I think they do have a challenge with finding practices who are able and willing to take on interns and to do so on a continuous basis. And the practice I was based at took over the course of 3 years. I think that took 3 interns, of which I was the first. But in having a lot of conversations with Russell, who was of the academy at the time as well, they're always looking for more. But there's been immense growth. They started off only in Cape Town and Johannesburg, and I think we went 15 in total. And from what I see now, they are all over the country, PE, Durban, Bloem as well, if I'm not mistaken. So there has really been a much better take-up. But from a practice side, it's difficult because you're still running a business, and the sponsors, the asset managers are on board, and the academy help to carry some of the financial obligations, because I mean they would want to pay you a livable wage or salary, but the way practices are set up is that if you're paying someone a salary, what value are they adding, and does that value translate into monetary terms? You can only do so much charity, so to speak. But if you're paying an intern X amount, that intern's not necessarily going out, seeing clients, finding new clients, and that also isn't the expectation. So it's tricky from both sides.
Sure, Aaron, I mean, it sounds like the profession is not yet set up for the structure. It's maybe a little bit ahead of its time, that they help you get work ready. But then that part of applying to 50 jobs with someone that, now has a degree and has these skills, like what was going through your mind? Like at that point, did you consider other career options? Do you revisit, is this what I want to do?
Yeah, I mean, you wonder. I mean, you have to keep your options open. At that stage, because it was the first round of it being that, I know the funding that the academy was able to subsidize was, the internship was actually only 8 months long. That was what they were able to do at the time. From what I understand, it's 12 months now. But I mean, I was in a fortunate position where the practice that I did, the 8 months internship, they actually wanted to keep me on. And they kept me on for additional year and then for another bit. But I mean, that could have been different. And for all their good intentions at that stage, they were able to put you into the job market, which is their mandate. And that's what the academy is trying to do, is get your work ready and get you a job. But I know come to think about it, out of the Cape Town group that I started with as interns, I'm the only one who's still in the industry. So yeah, that in itself tells a bit of a story as well. So like you said, it's really about how it's packaged, and is the industry ready for, maybe the structure should change. I don't know.
Why do you think it is that you are the one that's still here and the other ones dropped out? Because if I look at my class of people that did CFP, very similar stats, right? 90+% of them chose to leave, and they're no longer here. Yeah. So what do you think? What does it take to become a financial planner and sit it out? Like, what are those values without being boastful?
Yeah, you're putting me on the spot now. But yeah, I think the one thing you've heard from all your cases when you ask them about the history and the context now that got into the industry, all of them say they stumbled in or found their way into the industry, and it was the same for me. And I think that some of us stumble and find our way into the industry, and once we get in, like, this isn't bad, I actually like this. For 70 or 80%, they get in and they have a look around and they're like, I'm not going to hang around much longer at this. So, like I said earlier, it's only once you're actually in the thing that you know. But funny enough, you wouldn't necessarily find that same trend in law or in accounting or in HR or in medical fields. People who study that direction, generally that's what they know that they want to do, and they most of the time they end up sticking it through. But I do think the fact that I almost want to say that financial planning as a occupation isn't as well marketed. If I can put it that way, you really have to get in it before you get a glimpse. Whereas with other lines of work and industries, you get a much better sense and idea while looking from the outside. Yeah, I think what would one's more likely, or a student or someone in high school is much more likely to go up to a doctor or attorney and ask questions. What's it like being an attorney? What's it like being a doctor? What do I need to look out for? I don't know how many financial planners experience that, having students or high school learners coming up to them and asking them that. I don't know.
What would we need to change for that to happen? Because if you think about a chartered accountant, it's I only need to get through my articles, and then there's some light at the end of the tunnel. Yet with financial planning, it feels like the light might be there, but there's no guarantee. You still need to.
Where is the light?
Where is the light? Right?
Yeah.
Is that a function of the structure of remuneration?
Yeah, I think that historic burden that we are fighting so hard to correct or to redirect. I just think that again, and this is from younger people looking to get into financial planning as a career, and from an end client perspective, that whole perception, like you said, that whole perception around the industry, it's not, for many people, it's not something that's aspirational. You don't find many kids being one day, when I'm big, I want to do this, because of the perception, and not only perception, but the reality. Many people's parents, many people's grandparents had terrible experiences that have really put the damper on things. And I mean, people have bad experiences with attorneys and doctors and accountants as well. But yeah, it just seems like the brand around those occupations in the industry, maybe we should get better. I think financial planning needs better PR.
Absolutely.
Put it that
Absolutely.
way.
And I mean, let's talk about that, because you have, I think, very successfully rebranded yourself, and especially the work you do with the wealth coach, as someone that's approachable, that distills context and heavy information into something that's enjoyable. And as a financial planner, I mean, I watch your videos on Instagram, and these things are the number one, they're well made, and they're engaging and they're exciting. How did that start? Right, tell me about that, and is it successful? Right, is this a long strategy to attain clients, or what's your strategy behind this? Should financial planners listening to this spend more time on social media?
I'm gonna ruffle some feathers. So yeah, just to answer the first part of your question, how I got into the wealth coach, it was really born out of partly frustration and partly out of being at a place and a line of work that wasn't totally aligned with my passions and my values. So I found an outlet for it, an outlet where I can help and educate people with no strings attached. And that's really what it was. So when you're working as a financial advisor or planner, and your remuneration structures of such a nature where you're essentially in a position where you have to sell, and that's not necessarily aligning with who you are, you find a different outlet. So I think I found a productive outlet which I actually enjoy. So yeah, it actually started as just a branding exercise, as a differentiator. As an advisor, I thought there's thousands and thousands of other people who call themselves financial advisors. What makes me different? So it was basically a logo and a name and a slightly different way of doing things. And then I realized that this thing actually has a bit of legs. So yeah, that's how I leaned more into it and actually built out the offering and actually formalized it a bit. And I really took a deep dive first into marketing, into coaching, specifically into social media marketing, and just threw all of that together. So yeah, I went through 3 or 4 months of deep diving into podcasting, YouTube, TikTok, just learning and learning, deep diving to coaching, human side of money, all of that. And what came out was the wealth coach.
That is fascinating that you kind of just brought in information and distilling and distilling and distilling, and then said, okay, what am I going to tackle? How did you filter out those things? Because, there's thousands of tactics, very similar to a client coming to you and saying, hey, here's 50 different things I want to consider. How did you figure out what's going to be the most impactful for you and for the wealth coach?
Yeah, part of it is trial and error. If you go back into your LinkedIn messages, Lou, and you scroll up a bit, you'll see about a year and a half ago, I sent you a message asking about podcasts and telling you that I'm going to start my own podcast. That still hasn't happened and probably won't happen for a while, and that's exactly what I did. I spoke to people. Yeah, I was trial and error at one stage. I thought that was the way to go. But I took the approach that I take with a lot of things, and that's keeping the end goal in mind and reverse engineering, and then learning from the mistakes of other people. So looking at what I'm looking to achieve and what's going to be the most effective way to get me there. What's really going to achieve my actual purpose? What's the best medium to use? And yeah, that's basically in my case primarily LinkedIn and Instagram. TikTok comes in a close third. But yeah, it's a lot of trial and error. And yeah, I think you spoke to Tim recently, and I quite enjoyed that. There's a big push, and I mean, it's my colleagues as well. I'm constantly going on with them about they need to increase their brand presence and social media presence. But one needs to get to a place where you realize that this is something that I want to do and need to do, and then deciding on what medium you're comfortable with. Some people will be in a nervous sweat sitting over here talking to you on camera. Others hate writing. So it's about playing to your strengths. I'm a firm believer that if you're not a camera person, don't try to make yourself a camera person. If you're not great at writing, don't try to start writing blogs or something. So it's, play to your strengths and keep your end goal in mind, and then just reverse engineer it really. I'll make it sound quite simple.
Engaging with you and listening to this, is that clients that you work with in your 9 to 5? Like, are those the same people following you, or are you using this to generate new potential clients? Like, what does the engagement look like?
Yeah, so my aim with the wealth coach really stands totally separate from my 9 to 5. So I speak, again, it comes from my own need to speak to a certain audience. The audience I want to speak to isn't necessarily my 9 to 5's target audience. So when the wealth coach speaks, the wealth coach is speaking to the 25-year-old who's in their first job, or the 27-year-old who's in their third year of work, 32-year-old who just got married, 35-year-olds having their first child. That's really who the wealth coach is speaking to, and that's who I want to be speaking to. That's who I enjoy speaking to. I enjoy speaking to students as well, and I often get this opportunity to speak to them, which is something I quite enjoy. So yeah, that's really, again, an outlet for this drive and need I have to speak to younger people.
I think you mentioned a little bit earlier that's not necessarily the ideal target market as a financial planner, and that it kind of doesn't sit complete with your values. Can we talk about how do we make it an ideal target for someone starting out that could say, hey, I don't want to be dealing with a 60-year-old that's retiring and having to make these decisions. I want to deal with people my age that are struggling with things that I'm struggling with and help them on that journey. Like, can we talk a little bit about that? Because I think somehow there must be a way to service them, or you're doing this.
At that stage, you and your clients are almost equally struggling. Sometimes I know my manager, when I just started out, he told me that you can't. I mean, I was 24, 23 or something. He told me you can't really be speaking to your friends or peers because they're just as broke as you. So that's gonna work out. So yeah, and I mean that's what it comes down to. It comes down to feasibility and profitability. How much can you make? I guess it boils down to the question: can you make a living? Financial planner make a living out of servicing 25 to 35-year-olds while having their best interest at heart? And I think that's a question we can pose to the panel. So I feel like that should be a panel discussion because I really don't know. I want to say probably not. I really don't know. That's why a lot of financial planners, especially the ones that are a bit more established, tend to look at those who have more considerable assets, who have better means. Because I mean, just more feasible. So monetization, generating an income when you're with the Henrys are high earners, not rich yet. Especially if you're starting from scratch. I mean, if you have 150 working from a base of X amount of 150, 200 pounds or whatever the case is, then it could be a lot more feasible. But I mean, if you're coming from scratch, I don't know. Do you think it can be done?
So it sounds like this challenge is twofold. The one is the income per client, and then secondly is how do you accumulate clients quickly enough? What I'm wondering is these people are probably spending 7, 8, 9 grand a month on a car. Right? If you think about a high income earner, not don't necessarily have accumulated wealth yet, surely they would be comfortable parting with their money if they can see there's value for coaching experience or a monthly retainer. When we listen to the Michael Kitzers and his guests, people are doing like group coaching on this level and they're paying a few $100s to help them solve these issues. Yet I haven't really seen someone consistently do this successful in South Africa. Like, do we give up, or are you committed to finding a way to service this segment?
I'm servicing the segment. I don't know if I ever be fully able to make a living off it. That's the other question. So I think we can distinguish between financial advice and product offering and coaching and more educational offering on the other hand. You can throw speaking workshops into that category as well. I do think it can be done. Young people are willing to pay once they see this value. A lot of young people who do struggle, they realize that they're struggling, and it's about positioning yourself as someone who's able to help them solve a problem and help them solve their problem. And I think that's the trick with marketing. The client sees, okay, Aron does this, but can he do it for me? He solves this type of problem, but can he solve my problem within that? People are willing to pay. It's just about reaching them. And yeah, is there enough scale? It's about reaching them quick enough. So yeah, I'm ending up with more questions and answers here, to be honest.
And that's okay, Aron. I think this is worth having the conversation. I want to ask you, when people reach out to you with a specific problem, like, do they often diagnose the real problem, or is that just the little tip of the iceberg? And how do you go about figuring out what do they actually need help with?
Yeah, no, they look, most of the time people will speak of these symptoms. And when I market and make little videos or little posts or whatever, I'm speaking to symptoms as well. But it's only once you actually start working with someone, and I'm sure you'll be able to relate in that whole process of helping them uncover and getting the client to realize that this is actually just a symptom of something bigger. So look, sometimes you need to stop the bleeding, and you do need to pay attention to the symptoms. Yeah, you actually have to. And it's only once you've got the bleeding under control, that's when you can actually sit down and have a conversation and say, let's actually take a deeper dive into this. But yeah, when people reach out, they're reaching out with symptoms. People's money disappearing through the middle of the month, people struggling with debt, people knowing that they should be investing and it's probably the right thing to do, but they have no clue how to go about it. So yeah, that's where the educational help comes in, and in other instances, more of coaching help. It's really more of a behavior and a mindset issue that's holding people back. And I think those are probably my favorite people to work with is the people who actually have enough money. They just don't know it. There's enough money to go around. On paper, they're totally fine. But you ask them, what's your financial life like? And they'll tell you it's a mess. And it currently is. But once you're able to get through the mess, and you'll see that, yeah, that's quite rewarding.
Isn't that a function of the people that tend to worry about these things, or the people that are probably, fairly okay? I often think about it. The people that we see is the people that have made some provision. We don't see the people that didn't make provision or are so far down the line that actually, hey, things are bad. We need to stop the bleeding.
Yeah, in a lot of instances, things are bad, but there's usually either enough time and or money to still remedy the situation. But yeah, especially think about the whole money script concept, and the money vigilance. So yeah, most of the people who speak to you and I have that money vigilance, but it's never only money vigilance. And what I say, and it's an exercise I do with all the coaching clients I work with. One of the first things after they fill in their name, they do the money script questionnaire, because that's really one of the pillars or foundations that I use when working in a coaching setup with someone, because that's like taking the X-ray or the CT scan, because then you know what you're working with. And I'll often see the money vigilance and then very strong money worship.
Aron, for people that aren't familiar with this, can you explain a little bit the work of Brad Clance and what the money script is?
Yeah, so I'll explain it in the way I usually explain it when I'm speaking to people, and I explain it in the context of love languages, because we're really, most of us are familiar and very comfortable with love languages and how there are underlying needs and beliefs surrounding our interpersonal relationships. But at the end of the day, we have a relationship with money as well. So if there are love languages for our relationships with each other, surely there should be a language with our relationship with money as well. And that's essentially what how I see what money scripts comes down to. It's that deep-rooted underlying beliefs and biases we have around money. And it's brilliantly summarized into the 4 broad categories. I'm going to have to help me here, but it's money status, money worship, money vigilance, and money avoidance. And we all have one that's a bit more dominant, but we basically have 2 that shows itself. And it really speaks deeply to how we act with money, and that gap between what we know about money and what we actually end up doing. And what we actually end up doing is so largely influenced by our underlying money script that it can't be ignored, which is why it's one of the first things I do. And that money worship money script is really the one that has people running on that treadmill and chasing, where you'd see someone who's struggling with debt, earns enough, has a bunch of debt, and instead of what the logical thing would do is to reduce your debt, instead they try gambling or they try online trading to make more money to service that debt instead of spending less. And for me as an outsider, objectively speaking, you'd say, but that doesn't even make sense. It makes perfect sense to that person. I read something on LinkedIn a while ago where the person said that all money decisions make perfect sense. And a big part of my job is understanding what makes it make sense for my client. Why does it make such perfect sense for you? When objectively on paper, it just doesn't.
Aron, I want to add there, I think it's Rick Kaler that always says, any seemingly illogical decision makes perfect sense once you know the emotion behind it. And for people listening, you can Google CMSR, which is the Client Manuscript Inventory questionnaire. How do you use that, Aaron? Do you send them a PDF and say, hey, complete this? Do you send them a data points link? Like, whoa, like how do you do this in practice? Have you built your own quiz?
Geez, I still need to get to that point of building my own. But now I actually would send clients a link, and we would then they'd obviously complete it, and then in our following session, we'd spend almost the whole session just working through that. And yeah, it's quite eye-opening for the client, and it obviously gives me a much better insight into what I'm dealing with, because usually that would be the first actual session after the introductory chat I have with him. So yeah, then it really gives me a much better idea of who's sitting across from me.
It might be interesting for you to know that Data Points has teamed up with the Clances, and so you can actually have a custom branded, inventory along with a lot of other financial therapy tools. It is quite pricey for the South African market, but if this is a field that you spend a lot of time on, unpacking someone's behavior, it is probably helpful. Do people expect this from a session? Because I had a client today that said to me, oh, this feels like therapy. Like, this is not what I signed up for. And it was quite an interesting conversation to talk about. The process is therapeutic, but we're not attempting to be therapists. Like,
yeah. So I've in some of my initial documents I sent a coaching client, one of the points in the document says that the coaching relationship is not a therapy relationship. I'm a coach, I'm not a therapist. It's in the fine print there. And yeah, after 3 or 4 sessions of working with the young lady, she had a bit of an emotional moment, and she just said to me, I can see why you said this isn't therapy, because it can feel like it. It's so interlinked and interwoven, emotions and money. And sometimes we're talking about money, but we're also not talking about money. We're actually talking about your relationship with your mother. And now your mother is in an unhappy relationship because she's financially dependent on a significant other. And as a young lady, she maybe finds herself in a similar situation where she feels that she can't leave a relationship, and she doesn't quite understand why. And she's triggered by her mother's experience and what she sees her mother going through, for example. So yeah, money can't and doesn't exist in isolation. So it's sort of neatly wrapped with neat edges. There's a lot of overflow, but obviously that overflow needs to be contained as well, because we all, once you stick within your area of expertise,
So Aaron, you are also, you're 95, as you call it, a financial planner, financial advisor at Woodland Wealth. How much of these tools flow into what you do, or is there more of a strict structure around the work that you're doing there?
Yeah, so the work that I do at Woodland, obviously at Woodland we have our own processes, ways of doing things, school of thinking around advice. But I mean, the skills and the experiences I built up through working with clients under the wealth coach umbrella, so to speak. It's not like I can exactly leave it at the door. So yeah, there's definitely overflow, and I think either my colleagues find it annoying or they find it helpful. I think probably more helpful that I can actually share a lot with them as well, because in the clients that I deal with and they deal with, sometimes you just hear a bit of a moan of frustration from one of the other desks, and it's like, this client's doing this again. It doesn't make sense. I don't understand why he's withdrawing this much again, or I don't understand why this client wants to switch. We just spoke last week. That type of thing. And a lot of it speaks to the human element and those manuscripts. Yeah, and I mean, you see that whether you're working with 25-year-olds earning 20,000 Rand a month, or you're speaking to a 60-year-old that's accumulated massive wealth, it's the manuscripts, and still human beings at the end of the day. It's not like as you accumulate more wealth, you kind of become less human and become more rational. I think it might actually be the opposite. I think as people, where some people accumulate more, they become less rational. So yeah,
There's more things to worry about, right? There's more things there's more things at stake. And I think
yes,
maybe also that is why dealing with slightly older clients, slightly more complex, makes sense for a lot of advisors because the stakes are much higher. Like what
yeah,
you said earlier is that you have time and you have money and you have time to fix things. But for someone
no.
in their 70s, someone in their 80s, maybe they don't have the luxury of time. So
Yeah,
how would you position this work with someone that's of a different generation, of someone that's maybe not used to talking about their feelings around money? Like in a conversation where you can clearly see, hey, your money scripts are derailing your financial plan. What would Aron do? Like what are the things that you look out for, and what are the type of questions that you might pose to those clients?
Yeah, I listened to a podcast a few months ago. Yeah, and most of the podcasts I listened to some about the human side of money, and the whole theme was around the house of the helper. And I took that a bit further. In that the reason why a lot of financial planners are hesitant to speak about the softer stuff is because they haven't figured it out for themselves personally yet. So there might be a perception that all financial planners, financial affairs are perfectly in order because you know it all, you do it for clients all day, every day, alles is uitgesort, and it's not it's not the reality. I spoke to a legal professional a few weeks ago. Her husband's a legal professional as well, highly respected. They've got 2 children. They don't have a will. You can't make assumptions. So yeah, it's sometimes we spend a lot of time on focusing on others, and we can neglect ourselves. So I think the conversation is to solve with financial planners themselves, and they either need to go on that journey individually or they need to speak to someone. But I think as a beginning point, to someone listening to this and is but they're apprehensive, I think as a beginning point, do the manuscript questionnaire yourself and have a look at the results. Yeah, it really gives you some better insight into yourself. And then once you're more comfortable at looking at yourself in that context, then you might be more open to speaking to clients more about the human side and what's actually driving the decision making. I mean, we Portfolio Metrics has a great financial personality assessment that partially speaks towards one's behavior, and which is a good starting point. But I do think that is only the starting point. One of my colleagues mentioned earlier today about just adding value to review discussions, especially if your client has been with you for 17 or 15 years. You can only go through the statements so many times every year, and then both of you are bored. What else do you talk about? And this is the type of conversations one can have. And it really does add value. And the client walks out of that review meeting not only knowing what the return was for the year, but maybe learning something more about themselves as well. And then what's more valuable than that?
Isn't that so true? I mean, I just read a book, From Strength to Strength, and the summary of it was essentially that we should be spending more time on getting to know ourselves and our own strengths. And if we can facilitate that as financial planners, I'd be the first to acknowledge that my finances are far from perfect. And you don't have to have your finances perfect to be able to help someone else. Just like you have doctors that also get ill, you have financial planners that struggle with these same things. And I think we're still human, right? And acknowledging that and saying, as a human, I can show up and I can help guide you through this process if I'm healthy. Like you said, that health of the helper. What are you seeing from financial planners? What's the number one thing that they're struggling with at the moment?
Sure. I think one that comes to mind is probably something that will always be a struggle is what does the future look like in terms of clients, in terms of practice and how it all fits together. There's more and more news and movement around younger people immigrating. Are people leaving, or they're leaving and not coming back, or they're coming back? And I really think that the concern really depends on where practice is in its life, and who that practice services. But I think regardless of the segment of the market, so to speak, that you look after, these different challenges, and one that will always be there regardless of the segment you're in is the noise that's out there. How much should people actually be listening to? Yeah, I think sometimes we wish we could put like noise cancelling headphones on our clients until they are the next meeting with us and they can take it off and listen to us. But that's not the reality. Your clients are in all kinds of WhatsApp groups and they're getting messages from their father-in-law, look out for this and look out for that. Clients are seeing banks in the US folding. There's a lot of noise, and it's difficult keeping clients focused on the controllables and what's actually relevant to them. Where's the rand going? Is interest rates high again? How long are they going to stay this high? It's nice conversations to have around the braai, but that keeps some people up at night, and that's not useful at all. So yeah, easier said than done, but I think the biggest challenge is keeping clients focused on the things that actually matter and the things that's actually going to make a difference. Whether the rand goes to 14 or 23 or to whatever, how much of that can you control? Is your asset allocation in line with where you need to go? With adjust when need be, but stick the course. Simple as that.
Aaron, you have such a nice way of simplifying and like saying, the almost blatantly obvious. And I love it that you have a way of gently nudging people. For people that want to learn a little bit more of the work that you do, where can they find you? What's the best way to connect with you?
Best way would be LinkedIn. Aron Samuels, Aron with one A, and then the Wealth Coach everywhere else on Instagram, the Wealth Coach, TikTok, the Wealth Coach. I'm sure there's a massive TikTok audience amongst our fellow financial planners. But yeah, LinkedIn, Instagram, and TikTok is where you'll see me almost every day. And yeah, always happy to chat and engage. And yeah, I'm a learner, so always looking for learning opportunities.
Thank you so much for the content and the wisdom that you've brought today. All the best with continuing this marathon, because it really is.
Yep.
We're just getting started.
100%. Thank you so much. It's great chatting.